Welcome to the Sly Gittens Tech Simplified channel. And today I'm continuing the Women in Technology series. I have a great guest today. Her name is Jacqueline Touma, and she's going to tell you all about her story, how she got into the industry, and how she's continued to thrive. So without any further ado, Jacqueline, can you give my audience a background on who you are and what you're currently doing?
Knowledge is king. Sure. Thanks so much, Lane. Thanks so much for inviting me to this great session. And heard a lot about you. Your past sessions have been great. So, and this is just wonderful that you're continuing to promote women in technology. We all need great allyship across. So, for me, I've had a bit of a journey. I started off my world in political science, thinking I was going to go work for government and do all these great things. And, when I started into that, my first job out of school was really working for the government of Canada, doing a project about how the internet is shaping the government and how government services that we even at that time needed to be digitized and offer it to different levels. And then actually, from there, I moved on to Bell Canada, and then I got into Microsoft. And then certainly for me, the journey has been great from Microsoft to T-Mobile to independent consulting and Fluke Biomedical, and now landing at ServiceNow. And for my role at ServiceNow, one of the things that I love about it, because I love technology, and part of it, it's that continuing passion for IT, is I'm strategic director for technology alliances, which means I get to play with all of the big tech companies from Microsoft to Amazon to Google to AWS, IBM, and the others. So, for me, it's been an interesting journey around my career, and especially even my education path, coming in from a non-technical field to really, embracing IT as just a part of almost everything that we do and touching lots of different areas.
That is fantastic. How am I supposed to follow that? That was like a mic drop situation just now. But can you tell me, what was your first job and how is it completely different than what you're doing today? 'Cause I know you touched on that your education is outside of technology, but what was your first job and how was that like?
Sure. My first real job was with Bell Canada. And at that time, they were trying to understand how they could serve customers better. And
Mhm,
on the marketing side, we started to really try to understand how do we use what we call today as business intelligence,
mhm.
as AI, and see patterns and develop side of a marketing data science side. And it was for me around that art of the possible, around innovation and how technology really can help and enrich our lives, and how it was the great democratizer in terms of it didn't matter kind of where you came from, it didn't matter your background, that we all had a place to play in technology, and that it could really, force us to look at things and be able to help people in ways that we never thought possible. I mean, back in the day, the early part was getting our billing systems online so we could actually go online and pay a bill and do commerce functions. And I won't bore you with one of my first jobs in Bell Canada was essentially around 1-900 services about e-commerce on the phone, and how to change e-commerce on the phone and experience through a video kiosk, and then eventually an experience online through the thing that we call the internet. So, this digital transformation, this digital, innovation and strive to have and be an inclusive part of our life has just been an amazing journey for me that's just continued to fuel itself in whatever position I've taken on.
So that was a fantastic answer. So let's unpack a few things. Can you take me back to early in your career? What was your mindset? And let's add another question on that is, what would you tell yourself now, like with the information that you have now, to your Jacqueline when she first started at Bell?
Yeah.
What would you tell yourself? What
Yeah.
like how are you different today, if that makes sense?
I think I'm more of my honest self, to be honest, to be good, in terms of understanding where do I want to go with my career? What do I want to focus on in terms of experience? So, way back in Bell Canada, I actually got referred in by a friend. We were working on, a side project together, that kind of dealt with, some things around commerce and fishing and wildlife and that type of stuff. And, she was the one who really encouraged me to say, what do you really want to do? Do you want to make IT a career passion for you? And not so you get, you're not coding and engineering in some room, but you're dealing with our customers. You're looking at how to use technology to help better themselves. And for me, that helped me around a lifelong learning attitude, and to understand and try to come everything with a blank slate to say, what can I learn? And my advice to my younger self would be kind of like threefold. One would be like, take it all in, feed your mind, feed your soul, enjoy that journey of the experience. Don't be so rushed to get to the destination of a career because you think that's where you need to go. And, understand that those paths of a career are winding, and enjoy that winding experience around the road. And that leadership is a mindset. It's not a position. It's done in the service of others. And to be a little less hard on myself about climbing the ladder in some type of, structured world that, doesn't really exist. Because if you shift your mindset and you keep your mindset to open, you're going to enjoy a lot more of those experiences along the way.
You just gave the listeners a lot of gems there. Let's see if I can unpack a few of those things. Is one thing is you mentioned always, always continue to learn, right? And anyone who follows this channel, they know one of my biggest hashtags is always be learning. So when I started off, I used to always say always be closing. But then as I gained through my career, I'm realizing what separates people who can have continued success. They always looking for opportunities to test their assumptions or invest in their knowledge set, right? And as I progressed through my career, is the more knowledge I got in specific areas, right? And you want to find that knowledge. It's been imperative to success. I'm glad that you said that as well.
It's about learning from others as well, right? So the people around you are some of the richest sets of experiences that you're going to have, and being open with them and sharing your own experiences. It's a beautiful thing. And that's part of the reason I love technology is you are always learning. There's just so much to learn and absorb, and so much to discuss, and yet so much that still remains undiscovered.
Yep. And I think another thing you talked about, I really want to share, is that winding road for your career. Oh, yeah. And not work like early in my career. I started off as a help desk engineer, right? And I thought I'm gonna be a network engineer 1, the network engineer 2, then the senior engineer, then the SOC engineer. My career did not take that path, but it was okay, right? I'm still leveraging those skills. I'm finding that it was okay. It didn't matter, right? It was glad that I had a plan at first, but I think it was even better that I was flexible in that plan, and it was okay. One thing I probably would add is this failure, right? Fail fast, right?
Yep.
And leverage those as a learning experience as well, and in addition to your network. And in addition to those books is, right, don't be afraid to try. This whole interview was me attempting something new to see if it would work, right? And again, in life, I always try to test these assumptions and see how they go. And then you can fine tune them as you go forward, and that's how you get better going forward.
Yeah, and I'll put the assertion, if you haven't failed big time, then you haven't taken the right risk. So believe me, there's a ton of doozies of what people would call failure. But at the same time, here's the thing, it's kind of tongue-in-cheek about going back to your younger self and giving advice. If I would have followed that advice, I probably wouldn't have had the learnings that I needed to have along the way, because I needed to do that struggle to come out on the other end to where I am. And if I didn't have that, I'd be like, had I not gone through that, I probably would be in a bit different place. Maybe it would have been a better place that I would have landed in. But at the same time, it was good that I went through what I did.
And then you said that the best, because sometimes even when I'm looking back, and we all probably do this, and I think lose absolutes, probably most of us do, we look back, what if I would have known that beforehand? But would you still have the same type of fortitude, right? Those roadblocks that you found a way around it, they helped you be where you are. I think that's something imperative that we have to leverage. And you said one thing that I also like to touch on is the people, right? Leverage people experiences. So necessarily you don't have to experience. If someone else has experience and has shared it with you, leverage those experiences. So I can give you a great example. My older brother is 13 years older than me. He would tell me all the time when I was in high school, like, Sylvester, start studying for your SATs in your and it was my senior year in junior high school. Like, start studying now. I was like, I'm good at taking tests. I'm not going to worry about that. Comes around, start studying like 4 or 5 months. Didn't do well. And now I'm looking back like, why didn't I just take that, experience? He's trying to let me know that it takes a little bit more time to be prepared for these things, right? But now I'm starting to be more comfortable with those, just taking that outside experience. So that's one thing I just wanted to add there. Yeah.
No, I think it's great. And part of it, you understand that, hey, I should have listened to it. And I can give like lots of examples in my own experience of like, if I look back, why didn't I do that? But here's the thing. Now it's more meaningful to you. Now you open yourself up and you open up your thinking and you're like, there might be something there, not to stop you, but to fuel you and to use it to say, you know what? I want to be successful. Somebody's giving me some great advice. I need to take that in and consider, how do I use that? How do I digest that? As opposed to, I got this, because believe me, I think the older I get, the more I realize, the less I know.
Correct. And that's the funny thing about it. Like the more you get deeper into a subject, like even me as a system engineer and a consultant, as I learn more about these technologies, I realize how much things I don't know and I need to rely on other people. So it's kind of funny. That doesn't go away. I'm realizing it's just a part of the game, and it's okay to have a team, right? To be able to bounce those ideas off of. And this kind
and
of
just to be curious, to absolutely just keep that curiosity going, and that's not going to lead you wrong.
Perfect. And this goes right into my next question. So what obstacles have you facing your career, and how have you overcome it? And to give you some little bit more insight, the people who watch this, we have a wide range. A lot of them are earlier in their careers, mid-careers, women and men. But one thing I usually get in the comments, or I usually get in private emails on LinkedIn is, Sly, I'm in this situation. Something either with my manager. How do I overcome it? Or Sly, I don't have any work experience. How do I overcome that? Or I even have some ladies like, I'm not being taken serious.
Yeah.
So how do I have that conversation? And me being a minority, when can I bring that up without people thinking, did you get the job because of the color of his skin and not his intellect? Like, how do you have those conversations, and have you had any of those obstacles in your career?
Absolutely. Those are tough conversations to have for anybody. And part of it is, as everybody will tell you, we spend so much time at work, we really need to talk about the culture gap, right? The fit, in terms of, is the workplace, the place for you? And that is okay if it's not, in interviewing and hiring people. And we've all done a lot of that. It is about the fit. Like, how will you work? How will you operate in that? But that doesn't mean you accept always what exists. You have to understand you have a role in shaping that as well, and feel empowered to be able to have those open, honest, and transparent discussions. So, one of the things that I've really loved about working at ServiceNow is this whole focus on diversity, inclusion, and belonging. And I think that belonging sense, if you feel like you belong and the people around you matter and the people feel you matter, right? And you're bringing your authentic self to work, then you can have a whole range of open discussions and basically talk about what's that human connection that we're going to have, right? So when we start to talk about belonging, then that's when we say, hey, I don't really feel like I belong. Like, I feel like this is happening. And we should be able to have those conversations about feelings at work, because we're not robots. We're not just, hey, I'm going to go in, do my job, and then leave. The best cultures that I have seen focus not only just on diversity, because that's super important. They focus on inclusion, whether it's women. And there's all kinds of horrible stories about women hiding in the bathroom and crying during the day, and men going out to the parking lot and sitting in their cars crying because they don't feel like they belong at work. They don't feel like they matter. They don't think like anybody's listening. So to me, this is regardless of situation. And tech, you can, I don't have to quote you stats. I don't have to tell you studies. Tech has a problem with this, and not unlike other industries. But now it's about, and it behooves us to see, what are you going to do about them? And I think this focus on belonging really will help us get a long way. So diversity, inclusion, and belonging will help us have those conversations and have those solutions to how do we make it better for everyone, not in spite of them, but because of them.
True. And that was really great. And then just one thing I would just add on there is, just ask your fellow colleagues about themselves.
Yeah.
What do they like? What do they do? Where are they from? Right. I've been in a lot of tech roles, and most of the time, no one even knows I'm from Barbados. If they would just ask me where I'm from or where my family is from, they know, like, I'm born in Brooklyn and from Barbados. But these conversations never happen. So sometimes you feel like, do you want to know the whole version of me, or do you just want to have the version that you created in your head of me, right? And that's just not for me. That's for other people. And I've probably been on the other side too, where I haven't taken that time to really understand the person that's in front of me and what's their story. And because as you know, like you said already, is you spend so much time with these people on these projects, with our employees, our managers. But do we
Yeah.
really know them? Do we really understand them? And we don't have to be friends with them, but at least do we understand them? Do they feel like they're there, right? And I think
Yeah.
that happens. And I think one thing is that's a misconception that men doesn't have that either, right?
Oh,
You know, so I can even tell you when with like one of my recruiters, the first thing I taught her is like, I need parental leave. She was like, why? I'm like, because I want to be with my daughter. Like my wife's going to need help and I want to be there more than 2 weeks. I need to be there with a month. And what can I do to get that, right? That's
yeah.
important to me. And she wasn't, she was like, I never had this. No male ever asked me for this, right? Why is it? She could, like, sometimes it was hard for her to understand the importance to me along that lines, you know? So that was something that's sometimes a misconception.
Well, thank you for telling me that, because that is exactly what about bringing your authentic self to work about, and just being who you are. And I think part of it is we don't take enough time during the day to get to know each people and understanding what their stories is before understanding, oh, this is what I think of them. I mean, looking at me, people may say, hey, yeah, I know what she's about, blah, blah. But do you really? Have you asked me what it's about? Do you know that I grew up in a family of 9 kids, right? Do you know that, basically I'm a gay woman? Do you know that, I have struggled with, issues of hearing in my lifetime? So what I think we can do is not assume a lot about people, ask them, and also be mindful that some people may want to share more than others. Some people are
Right.
just like, I want to be a little bit more reserved, and that's okay.
That's okay.
And it's really about understanding who those people are and how they want to interact with you. And some want to open up a lot more and others want to open up a little. But I think coming to that relationship, and that's the focus, we need to think about not interactions at work, but relationships at work. And some are going to be deeper than others.
Correct. And that's a big thing, is that relationship is in all facets. I think people sometimes when I'm running into, they even something simple as connecting me on LinkedIn. Don't connect to me to increase your connection stats, right? I've done that in the past. I've been one of the people who used to do that.
We all get sucked in. I got 1,000+ people on LinkedIn. Like, who cares at the end of the day?
Yeah, like who did?
Unless
Like,
unless you have a relationship with a relationship on LinkedIn with 1,000
yep,
people is really hard to have. But
yeah,
what's the value of the deep relationships versus, hey, yeah, you'll have a bunch of casual, like, hey, I know this person off LinkedIn or this group or this event,
yeah.
and that's okay. But you have to really understand, what do you want to value in your life?
And what do you want people to feel when they interact with you? Do they know who you are, right? So that's something. I think you mentioned earlier. Be your authentic self, and it took me a while to gain that confidence to be who
Sure.
I am, right? To share those pieces. Like I do a lot of poetry, and people don't know that, right?
That's awesome. I'd love to share some, but yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, I love poems. I'm actually in the process of writing a poetry book for my daughter, just so I could capture those emotions that I had up until that point, right? Because I just want her to feel what I felt before I even met her, right? The thoughts that I had of her, and she exceeded all that once I first saw her, right? So those emotions, right? Sometimes you got to capture those. For me, writing helps me, is a stress reliever, right?
Yeah.
So those are the things I like to share. Like a lot of people don't know that, but if you just took the time to really gain the relationship, and it's always an ongoing thing, right? You gotta
It
be a
is.
two-way street, and sometimes you gotta realize I realize at work, you don't know what stress they're dealing with. If they look a little bit agitated, you don't know
Yeah.
what's happening on the back end. Like, and some people don't want to share it, and that's okay. Respect their boundaries, but at least reach out and ask, right? And that's one thing I'm getting better at,
Yeah.
as well, as this, not assuming I know Jacqueline. I don't know what she went through. I don't know before this interview what you had to deal with, right? Remember one of my meetings, one of the guys, his mom passed recently, and he's dealing with that, right? And I'm now understanding why everything needs to be perfect, because, that was his rock, right?
Yeah.
So work now has became a higher priority. So if you're not showing up at 100%, he might get frustrated just because, he's dealing with stuff, right? And you got to know these things. You got to be able to be vulnerable. And
You
I
know,
think it definitely helps out.
You're speaking to me so much, because one of my favorite bosses early on used to come in the mornings, and he used to just bring coffee and a pastry, or just coffee and whatever to somebody, and the first thing he would ask us is, how was your weekend? How was your day today? You okay? Is there anything I can do? Something you want to talk about? And some people, obviously, as you said, don't want to open up as much, but other people, like, I had a really tough weekend, and he's like, you know what? Take it easy today. I know we have a couple things to do, but make sure you take some time out for yourself, and understand that we're not robots, right? We're people coming to work with feelings, with pasts, with presents, with all of the stresses of today. And unfortunately, there's no better time right now, unfortunately, with all the COVID stuff going on, that people have an enormous amount of things going on in their life, and their headspace is in 15 different ways. And in fact, I was on the phone earlier today, talking to somebody, and that's like, oh, I'm sorry, Jackie, I need to stop the call. I need to go, deal with this. I'll be back in a couple of minutes. And I'm like, wait, what's going on? Yeah. And they're like, well, my kid just started school today. Things are like a little tough. And I said, you know what? This meeting doesn't have to happen today. Correct. Nothing's going to change between today and Monday. So you know what? Why don't you take that time? You go deal with what you need to deal with, because you know what? Your headspace isn't here, and that's okay. Your headspace is on something much more important today. Let's deal with it Monday. Right. And so having that empathy for people to understand, and not saying just during this time, but just overall, that, people want to do their best. They want to bring their best to work. But, some days just harder than others, my friend. Some days the stuff doesn't click as well, and you need a little time out, and take that time that you need for yourself.
Yep. And those little acts of kindness adds up, right? Because earlier this week, one of our, fantastic marketers on our team, she's going out on maternity leave. So we did a virtual baby shower. Cool. And I know when I was at RSA, they did that for me, and it made my world. So I had to be a part of it. I had to contribute it, because those little things you remembered, like my team really cared about me. They even sent me a cake, like frozen, like an ice cream cake. I told them I like that, to my door so I can have it. And that act of kindness from people that I didn't think would, because but that showed me how much they cared about me enough to spend the time to do that. And maybe it wasn't a big deal for them, but I'm still talking about it today, and that was over like 2 years ago now, right? So that was something that changed. Yeah,
that's what I mean by that sense of belonging, right? It's not that they're doing it because they're like, hey, he's having an important moment in his life. I want to help celebrate that and let him know that we care about him, and that we want to make sure he knows he belongs. And that's what I'm saying. And when you have that sense of belonging at work, and you obviously hopefully have it at home as well, it just changes your whole outlook. It makes you, basically dig down further, and also want to share that sense of belonging with others.
And you make a great point. So let's switch some gears.
You
and
got it.
Got deep. I enjoyed that conversation. I could talk all day about that. But now, can you share some tips on for interviews? And the reason why I ask, because you held a lot of roles in your careers, and I know now you're a director. How have your interviews changed from entry level, mid-career, to your director level now? Are they, what did you do to prepare? What's some tools that you use to kind of, make you better, that equipped you to have success in these interviews to get these jobs to further your career?
Sure. Well, and I've been very lucky, very, very lucky along the way. And part of it is taking and understanding what opportunities come your way, and saying, okay, things are going good right now, but there's something there that happened. How do I evaluate that in terms of where do I want to go? But my number one thing that I've done, and I've done this all along, is they're not just interviewing you, you're interviewing them. Right. So part of it is, don't feel that every interview you go to, you're like, I got to get this job. Listen, understand what they're telling you back, because I tell you, I've been in a number of interviews where I think the interview is going well, but then they start telling me stuff, and I'm like, is this really the place for me? Is this really where I want to have a fit? And, sometimes the answer will come back and say, hey, great, Jackie, we want to proceed to the next level. And I always haven't had the courage to say, no, I don't want to go to the next level. So that's what's changed. Now I'm like, I don't think this is a fit for me. The job sounds okay, and there's other things going on. So you have to have a vision when you go into these interviews of, why do you want this role? Yeah. Is it about accelerating your career? Is it about gaining different experiences? And be picky. I think, I've been very, very blessed where I've had the opportunity to be picky, to say, you know what? I don't like this job. In fact, I thought I wanted it. I thought I was going to go for it. But then when I went through the interview process, guess what? I was like, nope. But then on the other side, I've gone to some interviews saying, I'm not really sure about this. I'd like to learn more. And I've come out of there saying, oh my God, that was fantastic. I really, really want this job. And then the second thing I would talk about is they don't know who you are. You may say in your head, I have all these great experiences or whatever, but if you haven't talked about them, if you haven't shown them, they can't get inside your head. They don't know all of the stuff that you've done, and that you have to be more than your resume, right? In terms about, things of what you haven't talked about, what they haven't asked you. And then I think that the last piece, which I've talked about a lot more in my later interviews, is in the early interviews, it's like, what have you done? What can you do? Demonstrate your skill set to me. And it's more of a show me what you can do. In the later part of the interviews, and as you kind of scale up a little bit in your career, you not only just have to tell them about, hey, here's what I've done, but this is what I'm passionate about. This is how I want to take those experiences and skills and apply them to this area, whether it's a new area or a different area. And this is where I'm really focused on what I'm passionate about and what I want to do next. So you're taking that bridge in terms of from what I've done to what I can do for you, to what I want to go and be, and how that aligns with the company mission, the company values. And, things that I used to talk about in the early interviews is, okay, I've done this, I've done that, I can come in and rock it for you, versus now talking about, I have a set of experiences that I can apply to help you, but where do we want to go, right? Where do I want to go as an individual? Where do you want to go as a company? And what's that match like? I'll tell you that the quick quip is, earlier I would say, hey, just give me the rat race cage and I'll run it as fast as anybody and I'll improve upon it. And now I'm like, no, give me the green field with no cages and no nothing, and let's carve out a path of how we can get there. So for me, that's the difference in my maturity of going from, some independent interviews and, more junior interviews to more senior. But there's no reason why somebody who is maybe coming on to an entry-level role or their first job can't talk about, these are the skill sets I want to engage in. This is what I have to offer you. And how can we work together to sort of get to that better future for us both.
And then maybe that's something that you need to learn. We talked about, maybe you need to learn that the hard way. Yeah. But I can tell you is I've been lucky to have managers that sat down and asked me like, Sly, is this what you really want to do? Yeah. I can tell that you're going to figure it out. But when you figure it out, are you enjoying what you're doing? If you're not enjoying this,
why are you doing it?
Why are you doing it? And I remember like one of my managers just told me, he was like, I did a role for 2 years and I didn't enjoy doing it, but I couldn't quit because I thought quitting was a bad thing, not realize I needed to realign myself. And when he asked me that, at first, like, I don't quit, I'll figure it out. I'll work harder. I'll find a way. And then it's just funny, like certain things that make you change a little bit different. I was reading to my daughter. It's called Put Me in a Zoo. It was a book. And this animal was doing all these tricks and want to go to the zoo. He meets these kids, and the kids, he's like, let me show you what I can do. And the kids realize, like, hey, you're in the wrong place. You need to actually be in a circus, right? Well, your skill set used to be in the circus. And when I'm reading this book to my daughter as her nighttime story, I'm like, why is this little children's book is really hitting me in the soul? I'm realizing, like, what I'm doing isn't on line with what I want to do, right? And once I knew that, put in my 2 weeks, talked to my manager, we left on great terms, and it was the best thing I ever did. So if you're out here, to recap, is really sit down and figure out what do you want, what don't you want, and be able to tell your story and showcase your skills. And you can do that in a multitude of ways. And today, I use this to show my communication skills. It's YouTube videos. I use it for showing my demos. For technical, my ability to manage projects. So these are individual projects. I'm working on a portfolio site to showcase the stuff I can do collectively as a team, just not individually. And you can do so many other things that you can do. You can even start small businesses. I got friends who are graphic designers who create creative marketplaces and show that the volume they made on their side and the brands that they impacted. I got friends that's web developers that do family businesses, and they might not make any money, but it shows them that they have the capability to build this site. I got writers who just edit people's resumes to show writers, right? So it's so many ways for you to showcase your talents and put your own spin on it. And the way myself or Jacqueline does things, it might not be your way, right? So just add your own flavor to it. That's what I always try to do. So that's the one that I want to leave there. So the next thing I want to ask you is, any tips on salary negotiation and
Sure.
how to do that dance better? I kind of related to learning tango. You got to know when to make the move, or else you start stepping on people's toes, and that's never good. So any tips there?
Sure. And I think, what we said in the previous conversation, you got to know your non-negotiables. Like, you know what, you got to draw your line in the sand. And a lot of times it's funny, even with management of people, and when you get to that level, you'll realize a lot of times when people are not successful in a role, it's not because they're not smart enough and they're not hardworking enough. They're just in the wrong role. They're not enjoying their role. It doesn't drive their passion, and it's not an area they want to grow into. So thank you so much, Sly, for sharing that story, because I hope a lot of listeners take that to heart, because hey, we all have to pay the bills. Don't get me wrong, right? There's sometimes you just got to do what you got to do, but don't leave yourself in that situation. Have an exit path out to get to a better place where it drives your passion and where you can excel in the things you want to. And it's kind of the same when we talk about salary. You have to know what you need to make you happy. If you take a salary that's not going to make you happy because it doesn't allow you to take care of your family or financial bills and stuff like that, it's a really tough sell. But you have to know the market, and you have to know and come armed with data in terms of, okay, if I'm a developer, if I'm an engineer, and I'm a marketer, this is the going rate. This is the basically, what the market is saying to pair, and come with data and know what you think you're worth, and know where you are sticking it in terms of saying, this is it, I can't go beyond this line. And talk about understanding what the trade-offs are. Sometimes you can do those trade-offs for salary if there's a new set of experiences that you want that you haven't done before, that you start to say, hey, it's okay, I take a little bit less right now because I'm learning, but I want to learn, and it gets me into an area that I haven't been into, and I really want to get into that area. If you can afford to do that, do it, because money is not the be all and end all. The other set of the thing is, anytime that I've taken a job purely for money, it hasn't lasted, my friend, just as you said, because you're not happy in that role, and money at the end of the day is not necessarily the only motivator that gets you going. If you're in a job that you hate and it's a struggle going in every day, and it's just about the money, then you're not going to last very long. So in terms of negotiating salary, know your market, come prepared and armed, know what your worth is and what you need to get out of it, but also talk about what's the trajectory for growth. So if you can't give me what I need today, is that something that's, makes sense in the next year, in the next 6 months, and in the next whatever, to be able to go through. But the last point I'll give you is, don't sell yourself short, right? Know that you are valued, and that don't go on discount, and you don't go on sale.
Yeah. And I think you hit on a lot of things there. Is that everything is negotiable, right? So you might concede on salary, right? Yeah. But you might be able to make it up in a signing bonus, because I've been in situations where they have budgets, they can't go over the budget, but what they can do is give you a one-time payment that can make you, just satisfied for that current time. I also taken roles.
Or stock.
Yep.
Right, you're in technology, stock, or more time off, or more types of other benefits. Think about it as a whole package.
Yep, and make sure you actually take into consideration the city you're living in. So one of my good friends, the dude is way smarter than I am. This dude is super smart, right? But I kept telling him, like, hey, you're going into a higher market, so you need to ask for more money, because he came from Buffalo and Binghamton, New York. Both of those markets are cheap and affordable, right? So if you make it $80,000 in those two markets, it can go a long way. He was going into the Boston area. I told him that you got to add at least 20-30% on that,
3X, baby.
And I kept trying to belabor the point, and he kept looking online and saying, this is where I need to be at. I'm like, you're not taking consideration of where you're going.
Cost of living.
Cost of living. So make sure, and I know this is probably some fundamental things, but this is the little things that can affect your happiness in a role, because you might love the job, but if you find out you're making $50,000 to $40,000 or $50,000 to $60,000 less than your peers, and you're doing the same thing as all because you didn't negotiate well, that doesn't sit well either, right? And that could ruin relationships because you didn't do your job, or you just wasn't able. So just take that to heart. So,
absolutely. Or when you go and get the job, and then you're in there and you find out people are making significantly more than you, it already gives you a demotivation in that job, saying, Why is that the case? And like I said, for me, I like to think about it as a whole bundle of compensation, but salary is important, and women in particular.
Mhm.
You know, as a gender overall, we don't usually fare as well as our male counterparts in salary negotiations because they ask more and we don't ask more. Now, I know that's a generalization. So, you know,
Mhm.
listeners, please don't take that to heart, but I'm just saying overall, you need to ask with what you want because, you know, if you don't ask it, you're not going to get it. You're not going to be able to negotiate it because taking on a new role or you know, even just a different role in the same company, you need to make sure that it's the right step for you on all four fronts.
Yep. And I couldn't say any better. You got to be your own agent, and you have to make sure you ask, because if they say no, it's not a big
That's
deal,
fine. Yeah.
right? You know, but at least have those questions beforehand. Plan and ask them. If this is something that you know is a make or break, do not compromise unless you have to. Like if you need to pay your
Exactly.
bills and you have to, and you know you're going to do it for a certain amount of time, that's fine. If it's certain situations, that's fine, right? But try to find your way, your walk away point. So as we get in
And
close,
and
oh, go ahead.
and all the recruiters, sorry,
Yeah.
one more point. All the recruiters want to ask you is, can you give me a range of salary you'd like for a position? And then you should not necessarily think you have to respond to that.
Hmm.
You should be able to come back and say, well, what's the average pay in this
Correct.
area for that role, right? So, and they do. They have a budget usually they have to go into, but you can push them on that a little bit depending on you know, your skill set, what you're bringing. Now, you know, if the budget line is 80,000 and you're asking for 150,000, well, then you're farther apart than you can do. But
Yeah.
usually in a role, there's like, you can play it up a little bit or play it down a bit based on your experience and you know, shaping the little bit of the salary requirements around that. So apologies, Sly, but I just think that's important to cover, to say there's always a usual bandwidth, but you got to kind of keep it within some guideposts.
Yep. And I think the last thing to add on that, if, like Jacqueline said, if you really like this job and its skills that you're going to gain, and you take a little bit of a haircut, it
Yes,
might be beneficial, because I have taken jobs. So my
sure.
first job out of college, I took a role at Ingram Micro as a tech support rep. I was making $15 an hour. And my mom and my dad is like, you went to college to make $15 an hour? Are you crazy? You know, but I'm like, Mom, they give me my certifications for
Yeah, yeah,
free. They give me free training. I'm like, Google works there. I'm like, Google is one of their customers.
yeah,
You know, HP is there. They said I could take all these certifications for free, and
yeah.
I don't have to sign a contract either. So I'm like, I'm going to grad school right now for me, you know?
Yeah.
So I went there, and that was the best thing I ever done, because I got to learn a lot about different technologies, and I spent the weekends just learning more about things and how the business actually works. And that was the best thing I ever did, is take that step back, humble myself. I also found kids there who had high school degrees that knew the technology better than me with a college degree. And that showed me another thing, that degree, that piece of paper, it matters for certain things.
Sure.
And I do value the education you get there, but don't devalue someone because they don't have that degree, because if they have that formal education and they have that experience, sometimes in my case, that definitely outweighed my book knowledge because they had application. And
Yeah.
again, I know that's a generalization, but in certain situations, definitely this, don't downplay your skill set and what value you could bring to a company.
Hey, some of the smartest people I know never went to college. So part of that is being able to interact together, right? And bring the knowledge that you have and bring the knowledge somebody else has and kind of share that. And I think that's a super great point, Sly, in terms of making sure that when you are looking at a company, you look at what are their opportunities for you to grow in that company? What are the opportunities they're going to support your own personal development and your own personal growth? And sometimes, you know what, that's definitely worth a little bit more off the salary. Or if they have such a great culture, you know, we could talk about the horrible culture of some companies and we won't go there, but you
Yep.
know, the money at the end of the day, at least for me, in my position that I'm in right now, I don't want a toxic workplace. I don't want to have to go to a workplace every day that I struggle with. And that $10,000 or $5,000 or whatever that amount is, it's
Yep.
just not worth it in
Not
the end.
worth it. And don't fall in love with the name. For
Exactly.
me, you know, sometimes you want to go to Google and Amazon, but then are you that type of worker that they're looking for? Like, what
Yeah.
are, like, some,
It
for
has to be
me,
a fit.
I'm not willing to give up that peace of mind, right? Some people are, right? You just got to figure, does that culture work with you? I think you mentioned that earlier, Jacqueline.
Yeah.
So as we start getting closer to the end of this interview, I want people to know you a little bit more. So would you mind sharing some of your favorite books? And also, can you also share, how can the audience contact you? if they want to continue this conversation?
Sure, sure. You know, there's a lot of great books, a lot of great podcasts out there. So, a couple of my favorites are this though. The one of my favorite reads in the last little while has been The Subtle Art of Not Giving a F blank. And really why? It's kind of what some of the things that we talked about. It's like meaning and growth comes from the struggle. And part of it is you need to cut away all that facade of stuff and get down to what really matters. So it's not telling you to not give a flying F about all this stuff. It's saying, you know what? You can't give a flying F about all these things going on. It's too overwhelming. It's too stressing. Focus on what really matters to you, and you'll be a happier, kind of a happier person around that. And kind of one of my favorite podcasts is called Fix Work. And it's like the punk rock HR podcast with Lori Rudiman, and hopefully I'm pronouncing her name right. And it is all about a lot of the issues that we talked about. So I encourage you to go take a listen. If you look up Fix Work or punk rock HR podcast, you'll find it. The other one is the HBR Idea Cast. It's all about technology and innovation. Lots of great thoughts, lots of great leadership there. And then my last is on NPR, and it's called How I Built This. And it's stories of everyday entrepreneurs about the struggles they went through, the challenges they went through, and how they put these amazing, startups and amazing companies together to help inspire you to say, yeah, it's going to be a journey, and nothing like clicks on like this and goes on overnight. But if you have that passion, if you have that drive, if you believe you can do it, you can do it. So those are a couple of my favorites, and certainly encourage listeners to go check them out. So how you can find me is certainly I'm on LinkedIn. Please go ahead and try and connect with me. But when you do connect to me, ask yourself why, right? And give me a reason of why I should get to know you, and why do you get to know me, just to prevent that fakeness, Sly, that we've talked about in terms of people just doing the crazy LinkedIn connection. Personally, my personal email is up on my LinkedIn account. So happy for you to engage with me.
Perfect. And I make sure to put those contact links right in the bottom of this YouTube, so you don't worry. But before we leave, what's one last thing you want to leave with the audience?
I think we've talked about a lot. I think the one last thing is make yourself happy. If you don't make yourself happy, you can't make anybody else happy, and you'll have a much more enjoyable life and have a better outlook and better ability to deal with all the stressors on yourself. So find out what makes yourself happy. That'll drive your passion, and just go for it. Be fearless.
Great. Well, that's the end of this show. So thank you for coming, Jacqueline. It was fantastic. Enjoy the dialogue we had. And Sly Gittens and Jacqueline is going to be out. Peace.
Thank you guys so much. Thank you, Sly. Okay, bye-bye.